and I was transitioning out of the military. I had all this. I had an army of folks to help me
Right.
find my way, figure out, how to get a job, how to do my resume, how to set up my LinkedIn, all these different things that we don't use in the military. And all they told me was, "Hey, when you get to a place where you're set, just pay it forward." And to me, that was orders. So like, I'm just paying it forward, man. I got to recoup my debt, or I feel like I'm indebted.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely feel that way, and one of the ways I've been trying to give back is by educating the military community, the veteran communities, and even active duties, soldiers, Marines, and airmen, sailors, before they get out of military. How do I catch them while they're seeking for the next transition and next career?
Mhm.
Right. So yeah, machine learning is a great transition. So if I have lots of veterans in my LinkedIn network. So if you're listening, this conversation is for you, right? So you have some interest in AI machine learning, but you're not sure how to go about it. This is a conversation starter, right? And I want to introduce you to our weekly webinar, right? This weekly webinar is to engage in wide ranges of topic between AI machine learning. And as we engage, say for middle of the week on a Wednesday for like a lunch hour, because if you're in Eastern Standard Time,
Mhm.
um, I want to do a spectacular job of teaching you everything about AI machine learning, plus a whole industry in lunch and learn, right? And do it very
Mhm.
poorly.
Absolutely.
But we'll try. We'll get the conversation started, even if it's poorly. What we can do is, have a follow up conversation, have a follow up dialogue. If you're in the industry and you're looking to develop AI machine learning for your industry or your organization or your team, feel free to reach out. If you're a military veteran looking to transition out of military, and or transition into a new role, or want to upgrade your job, whatever the case is, feel free to reach out, because I would love to hear your thoughts and your roadmap on how it is that you would like to be part of this AI machine learning community. It's definitely growing, and time to get started is now, no matter how far out the roadmap goes. Um, so I think today's discussion, today's industry that we picked is healthcare, and this, we usually pick different industry every week, right? This week, actually, we're doing a part two of what we did last week about healthcare. It's because healthcare industry is not so just personal, but it is such a wide spectrum, right? You can't think of it enough, because like a good transition to this webinar is that last 3 hours I was in Children's Hospital, right? To
Mhm.
see my son there, and have him checked out. So uh, today is a special day, because I was in the hospital looking around, seeing like, okay, oh my goodness, there's so many ways AI machine learning could make an impact. Let me actually sit in this building and try to understand what are some of the use cases for AI machine learning as I'm sitting here, right? I don't get to go usually to a healthcare place, but I know you particularly have been in these environment where you spent most of your careers in, I believe. Not only did you train, but you are, in the medical field. So let me not introduce you, right? Please go ahead and tell us more about your background and experience, because there's so many use cases I want to talk about, but it's important that we make the introduction.
Absolutely. So my name is Anuj Kainth. I did nearly 20 years in the military as a combat medic. Prior to that, I was a EMT with a local fire department. But I spent all that time from point of injury care to uh, working in clinics. I worked in large hospital facilities, also in forward deployed situations to combat zones. So that's kind of where my experience stems from. After my military time, I decided I was going to go into IT. I had spent all my tuition assistance that the military gives you on acquiring both my bachelor's and master's in computer science and then IT management. And I decided I was going to try out this thing called ServiceNow. So now I'm a ServiceNow developer, developing solutions with a company called NewRocket. Absolutely phenomenal company that provides the most customer centric solutions I have ever seen. They have the greatest work environment I've ever experienced. but yeah, they're all around awesome, and we're starting to get into the federal space too. So it's pretty cool that I get to talk about this. From here on out, all the opinions and stuff are my own. I gotta put that disclaimer. But yeah, I wanted to give New Rocket a shout out because without them, I wouldn't have all these learning opportunities that I have today.
Shout out to New Rocket. Shout out to any of the LinkedIn network folks that are listening in. Feel free to chime in with your comments or questions, because that's what we're here for. This is an AMA. Ask me anything, not a TED talk.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We want to be able to have
Absolutely.
a conversation with who's listening in. Not necessarily, able to answer all your questions, but we'll try. Maybe in the ballpark, because this is off the cuff kind of questioning you have, and we want to be able to answer you the best of our capability. So with that, I think the healthcare industry has been putting in so much effort into improve the user experience, and I think that's a great endeavor to be part of, because at the end of the day, you want the healthcare providers to have a lot of assistance, right? And healthcare providers are the focal point. The nurses are the focal point of the industry, and to have assistance that is AI based, a digital twin, sort of like augmenting AI. It's super attractive for the healthcare industry, but I think it's a slow moving vehicle at this point, and
Mm-hmm.
picking up speed and catching on very fast. I think one of the things that we've seen recently, ChatGPT, which has caught on fire because of how the user experience have been wildly shifted just overnight, right? Like 6 months later, it feels like the ChatGPT has been part of my life for the last 6 years. I want to say that same will happen with the healthcare industry, where you will see
Mm-hmm.
rollouts, then adaptation will be really, really fast. Because once people saw ChatGPT and they wanted to adapt that
It's
ChatGPT like capability for their organization, I think it's going to happen with the same with the healthcare. So, sort of want to get
it's
prepared.
definitely yes, sir. It's definitely about folks that maybe they haven't realized the potential, or they just don't know. You don't know what you don't know, right?
Right.
And that's that disconnect that we got to bridge is between that first line worker in healthcare and that developer who knows AI, right? And we got to figure out how are we going to use this. Like, um, maybe it's set up on a camera visit where an AI is your physical therapy tech. It can measure the angles of your different joints and take that data and measure that progress as you do the different exercises in front of the camera over time, uh, things like those, imagining those different applications of that AI, or that AI saying, hey, your shoulder movement is decreased by X amount of degrees
Right.
um, laterally, so therefore I'm going to suggest these different exercises to you, and then we'll check your progress again next week. AI could do that totally if we're
Motion
going just based off data points.
right? Motion intelligence was my favorite topic when I first started looking into the products and wanted to develop a product. And I said motion intelligence is where I'll spend most of my life in. Um, Funny enough, I'm still interested in motion intelligence, but what you're describing, that motion intelligence as a use case, it is so easy to achieve. And when I mean that easy, I
Mm-hmm.
mean to scale to all the other capabilities that you want to develop. This is a
Yes.
great start. This is a
You
great
start
start
simple,
because the user
right? We
experience.
get that minimal viable product, that
Yeah,
immediate return on investment,
right,
you know.
right.
Like what if I called the
Device
nurses line?
It's a device
What if
agnostic.
I call the nurses line and my kid has 101 fever, right? That's a very common, like in the healthcare industry, a lot of times you could even just call that after your testing and your exams, oh, it's just a viral illness. It'll pass in a week or two. That's very, very common. A lot of calls come in like that. And maybe that AI can detect, okay, first things first, let me go back in this child's health record and see if they have any complications from birth to now. Okay, there's no complications. All right, let me ask predetermined questions for your locality and lifestyle to determine where this child has been, what they might have been in contact with, right? Then you talk about contact tracing or other different diseases that might be concentrated in that area. Cool. Now we can make educated guesses, because that's all healthcare is: educated guesses. Very, very structured, educated guesses. You know,
Yeah.
and we can give them advice on whether they need to go on in immediately, without, or do they need to, can they do some, hey, give your child Tylenol, or give this before you come to the ER, or I'm not a doctor. I was a medic, so some of my examples are going to be very, very simplistic.
Well, not to separate out the medics and the doctor or nurses, like whoever works in the healthcare environment and has to deal with patient repeatedly, right? Be it a doctor, be it a nurse, be it just somebody who stands in the door and greets people, whatever the case is, they are seeing the patient's pain in the most vulnerable point in their life. And these conversations, the engagement that we need is not just from a doctor or nurse, we need that from everybody, right? And healthcare
Right.
administrator needs to be part of this conversation because their input matters, right? So, say, for example, as you're discussing this topic about electronic healthcare record being examined by an AI, well, there's some privacy issue behind it. How do we solve that? If we have to train a model, do we train that model based on actual electric healthcare record, or are we creating a synthetic data? Or if we do use the actual electronic healthcare record, do we have the consent of the patient that came to visit us 10 years ago to say, like, when you signed off, we didn't tell you, but here it is that we are using your data for this purposes. So not everybody will be in the trench trying to figure this stuff out, but some of these questions will come up. And how do you deal with it?
Oh, yeah.
Due diligence is a core component of having a successful deployment of an AI. And I'll tell you, one of the numbers is that 83% of the AI machine learning capabilities they develop, they never deploy. It's because once they go through that design phase and development phase and they're ready to deploy, they come to find out through test and validation that some of the things that they have inside the system is not ready for deployment, right? And rest of it, the 17% that does deploy, doesn't really produce the return on investment that they thought. It kind of flats out, right? It's not able to scale because when it was designed, there wasn't a lot of optimization process built into that deployable AI machine learning capability. And that's a long conversation. But to go back to your point that, yes, we need a room full of people to come together and go around the room, collect everybody's opinion in a design phase, and just have that conversation like, okay, where do we see ourselves going? And how does this nurse picking up a phone call and providing an information to a worried parents instantaneously, how do we scale that? How do we optimize that for further use cases? Like, what do we take this one MVP and grow it to a large point? Lots of questions, but we will go through the answers over time, I hope.
I had that ethical considerations as the 8th point down for later in this session. But yeah, definitely. I mean, just providing that immediate value. We could look at, hey, let's look at a visit, right? You're going to family practice for a regular doctor visit, something that's chronic, and you make your appointment on the phone call, and AI then takes that information and goes, 37-year-old male, complaint of right knee pain for 2 weeks, past history, pulls all your past medical history and surgical history, everything pertinent to that injury is already presented to that CNA who's going to do your intake when you arrive, right? Then you take it a step further. You freaking come in, you do your blood pressure, all your vital signs, and then it trends that data and returns more suggestions to the CNA of how to route this next case. Maybe ask more questions. That brings up, maybe this person's blood pressure is higher than normal. Hey, have you changed anything in your life? Is there more medications that we are outside of our system that maybe we should know of? Having all those things pre-positioned and tailored to that patient.
Yeah, and these are the subject matter expertise that we need to have in our communication, right? The subject matter expertise, communicating their concerns, communicating their insights, communicating their future need for scalability and optimizations, right? Our mission weekly webinars or anywhere we go, is to comfortably communicate AI machine learning requirements to whoever's listening. And if you're listening, that means you will have to want to communicate that requirement that you understand very well to a AI machine learning developer or AI machine learning designer, right? Somebody who's
Right.
really technical or non-technical, whatever the case is, you should be able to communicate with each other rather than over each other, right? Because what happens in the requirement gathering phase is that we miss out on a lot of the details. And by the time we start developing, the people change and people's opinion,
Hmm.
questions and concerns changes, right? And they forget some of those nuances, little points that will make the difference in your due diligence or your testing and validation, right? So some of the
Yeah.
concerns that we always see, like, this is my perspective, is that we see a software Jenga, right? That's what I've seen in many organizations where we just have like lots of software adaptation from different types for different pain points. Um, there's a fresh chance nowadays to say, we can start from the scratch with AI and have all these softwares work together and have all of our AIs optimized in a way that we're able to perform. Okay, let's put it like this. The priority is user experience for many
Hmm.
of the providers. But if you're a business, your priority is how do you compete better than your competitors, right? How do you
Exactly.
your competitors. So whatever the prioritization is, I think it works for both provider and the business owner to say, okay, we saw that software Jenga for so many years where one software goes out, the rest of them stops working. How do we do it differently now that we have this ability to say adopt an AI over the software that we've been adapting to for so many years, right? But
Hmm.
that's a long stretch conversation. But the point is, you want to be able to communicate your concerns. You want to be communicating your needs for AI machine learning purposes very comfortably. And we want to be able to help you with that. And that's what we do. We hold a facilitated dialogue around healthcare needs, but AI machine learning, how that will be providing you the augmentation or assistance in having those needs met, be it user experience, be it patient care, be it just providing a service to the provider or your business as a whole, right?
Correct. Yeah. It's always finding that balance between in business and delivering that customer experience, right?
I know it's very easy to get caught up in seeing something and doing something, right? Um,
Hmm.
like you see Chat GPT, all of a sudden you come to the office next day, like, I'm just going to order Chat GPT today and have it all come and work for me somehow, right?
Yeah, that's
Finding things on top of the mountains that we see, we kind of have to start off in the valley and do the hard due diligence work to scale ourselves up. And one of the things that we can do is save time and save effort and save energy by doing the right things in the early stage rather than to get caught up downstream where you're ready to
yeah.
deploy and you realize, well, it's not ready to deploy because we didn't do really a lot of the designing that we're supposed to do. So I think you're a software developer, so you understand continuous development, continuous integration, continuous designing. Is
Hmm.
something that probably gets dropped out a lot, right? Because if you're designing, that means you're optimizing, and when you do DevOps or MLOps, you want to have that capability to say, like, how do we develop and integrate and implement while we're always optimizing, right? So when
Yeah.
you start off in the early stage, you want to set those culture of continuous development, continuous integration, and have the right stakeholders involved. And whatever it is, you're doing a healthcare delivery, you're doing data privacy, you're looking at the data in general. Whoever you are, you have to start thinking how to scale over time and what happens after you deploy it. Unlike software development, AI lifecycle begins actually after you deploy it, right? Uh,
Hmm.
because we know software, if you release it, somebody has to fix it, right? Something
Yep.
goes wrong, call Anuj right now, right? And Anuj is most likely will take care of it within a few hours. But when it comes to AI machine learning, it's kind of like you're raising a child at that point, right? And you have to have lots of people,
Hmm.
the whole village involved in
Yeah.
making sure that AI is doing the right things.
Hmm. And then there's so much bad information out there that can get ported in too. We talked about garbage in, garbage out, just like your body, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so
Yeah,
yeah.
it's important that the data that you feed in the early stage, the data that you are able to identify, right? Because if you think about your software development, your software has been developed so that way it can create a pipeline for your data, right? Now you have to create more
Mhm.
software to have better pipeline and better data acquisitions. And like I said earlier, you cannot just use the data because you have it available, especially in the healthcare industry, right?
You're trying to translate knowledge into wisdom, right?
Yeah.
And that's where the hard part's going to come in, because all these folks, that the stakeholders that are going to have the input, they have all the knowledge in the world, but it's that situational wisdom that they carry that's very, very hard for humans to even describe. you know how do you know this? Well, I know this. Well, I don't remember how I learned it, but I know this.
Yeah, yeah. I think
If that makes any sense.
it's that approach in corporate world where we start off with knowing, but you have to start
Hmm.
doing. And there's a gap between knowing and doing, but how do you take that doing and turn it into a being? And I'll explain that a little bit more, right? Just because you know, just because you have the data doesn't mean you're utilizing those data. And majority organizations, we have lots of knowing and not enough doing, as in we store lots of data but we don't use them actually, and we use them for future leverage, as in, oh, what if we do get audited and we have to prove something, right? Well, you're not giving that baby away in a bathwater. What you're doing is you're leveraging that data for more. So if you know and you want to do, you have to utilize those data right away. And by doing that, what you do is become a being of a data culture, which we've been promoting for a very long time. I think last 30 some years, the only slogan we've heard is that, you have to become a data culture because data is what's going to be part of your portfolio in the coming decades. Now we're seeing more of that, as in part of your business portfolio, no matter how much profit you make, the part of the portfolio concern is that, how do you leverage your data? What is it you do with your data? Does it sit in a warehouse somewhere and you wait for it to pull it out when you need it in an emergency, or do you continuously integrate your data as part of your business process? So, and that's saying that knowing and doing matters, because once you start doing, you automatically start becoming, right, being that AI culture, that data culture, whatever type of culture you need. So it all works in synchrony, as in, if you start because you know something, you have to start doing it. So if you know you have data, you start using those data, and you become a data culture over time, knowing or unknowingly. But you have to understand that intention behind it. Like, do it all intentionally, so that way, whatever you know, you do it, and you do it with intentions, and over time you become it, right? Um, Let me stop there. I got to breathe there because that was an exciting.
That's a
Day.
lot to
There's
unpack.
lot to unpack, but that was a wisdom, right? That you brought that up.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what I see this whole AI thing as, is like translating organizational knowledge into organizational wisdom
Yes.
and making it a global phenomenon.
And if you see the pattern that I'm really a fan of, right, is breaking everything down into three, right? So, like I said, knowing, being, and doing. For me, this whole conversation comes down to your data processing and human in the loop and your optimization, right? I've mentioned
Right.
optimization a few times, and I definitely mentioned subject matter expert in the human in the loop. But this data processing piece is a giant conversation, right? Because when we talk about data processing, we think of like, okay, data processing is in, I'm going to take a bunch of data on a file, on a bucket somewhere, and send it somewhere for processing. No, I'm talking about data processing within your device, that ability to, me and Anuj have a webinar right now on a live, from Dallas, Texas to Austin, Texas, right? We can do it
Mhm.
from Argentina if I wanted to, right? It'll be all data processing part of that, right? It's like, because the data processing is so optimized and so efficient that we can do this
Yeah.
live, right? And this data processing is increasing in tremendous amounts. So one of the things that I want to start off with is to say, they recently did a surgery in London via
Hmm.
5G connection from California, right?
Yep.
So you've seen that clip, amazing clip. Like, you're looking at it like, okay, that doesn't make any sense. Like, that could be just fake. But whatever the case is, the data processing capability is exponentially growing. And the reason it's growing is because of things like AI and machine learning semiconductor chips are coming into the market to make this process much more attractive, more efficient, and easily accessible, right? Easily accessible by millions of people, right? So this data processing is very important. And if you start understanding data processing a little bit more, not that everybody in the room has to understand it, but as a CEO, as an end user, as a person who's in mid-level management who will eventually become CEO, think about it. 6 years or 5 years down the road, that data processing capability we don't have today will become widely available. Just like we didn't have Zoom 10 years ago, we will have Zoom all in every room possibly, because Zoom is able to process that much data actually and provide you with tons of service that your camera's current day cannot provide. Because the camera alone is not able to do AI machine learning. But if you're able to do AI machine learning that much faster, think about how you're able to take just a single device that is AI machine learning agnostic, doesn't even know what AI machine learning is, but because of data processing capability on the internet, you're able to do AI machine learning in real time, right? A good example of that, like I said, is the 5G connection between California and London to do the surgery, where the surgeon is sitting in California and doing surgery in London, right? But now imagine if your Skype, or if not Skype, excuse me, your Siri or your Alexa is able to have normal conversation with you like ChatGPT would through a keyboard. That's because
That
of
would
data
be great.
optimization, right?
Yep.
Exactly. And the adaptation of Siri and Alexa will skyrocket because the user experience has increased in amount, and your data processing capability is good. You built in human in the loop to provide services that are to say it's safe, it really cares about security, and it has lots of privacy built into it because we can process all three of this topic as we are processing our data, right?
Yes.
And guess how you optimize? If you are a doctor, you have Siri and Alexa sitting in your let's pause there for a second. Let's not say Siri or Alexa. Let's secure a healthcare provider
Let's say
providing
virtual assistant.
a virtual assistant, right? Let's call it a digital twin that's sitting in the room and you're able to dialogue with it, right? And it's able to provide you with the real-time information with high accuracy and most confidence, right? And you're able to have a dialogue with it, unlike you getting bored with Alexa, because you ask Alexa 2 questions.
What if
you're already
what
lost.
if I told you there's organizations leveraging ServiceNow and Alexa or a virtual assistant to improve it? You know, those do exist right now. It's crazy. But I'm glad you brought up those virtual assistants, because since ChatGPT came out, like I don't even want to talk to them anymore. They, you know, it's like talking to kindergartners now. I ask them and they don't understand. I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna go turn on my PC and go talk to ChatGPT. So that's you know.
Well, I'm laughing because that's the way I feel. That is the only truth I know right now. Because as I said, I don't realize what I did with my life before ChatGPT came out, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you exactly, but it just I don't feel like talking about those things because they're bad memories. Like those painful to go through Writer.ai or Quillbot or all the other AIs that were very limited on all the
Yeah.
ChatGPT feature. ChatGPT is an optimized version of all the Writer.ai, Quillbots. I think there's a Shakespearean site that did grammar AI or even Grammarly, right? So, or now the other day you heard about Chegg, like doing homework,
Yeah.
right?
I'm using it for everything.
It's been optimized in a way that you can go to a single site and have a full-blown conversation so you can code, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can do your data structuring for your AI machine learning purposes. You can verify and validate some of your data for your AI machine learning purposes. You can talk to it about AI machine learning development if you wanted to. It will give you step-by-step on everything you need. Let me stop right there because I think I'm getting too excited.
Yeah, definitely. So, like, you talk about help me code and whatnot. Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's, I didn't think to do this until later. I was like super frustrated with a bit of code that I've been stuck on for a couple of weeks. And finally, I was like, I wonder. And I just copied and pasted it into ChatGPT and said, find the error. And for 2 weeks, I was stuck on this. It spit out an answer in less than 2 seconds.
And
Oh, this is you. You
accurate?
have an extra space on line 18. I'm like,
oh God,
you know,
so insane.
something like that. So everybody's been there. It's but yeah, and then you were talking about this data processing. When I think about the data processing that AI can help facilitate, it immediately goes to drug discovery. You know,
Yes, it has always
straight
happened. Yeah,
massive amounts of experimental data that has to be parsed through and analyzed,
that's
you
right.
know, to come up with new drugs, new treatments, you know.
So I always step back a little bit, and I always step back to say, like, how do I speculate, right? Because it's information is coming in so fast that I'm thinking, like, is this actually happening, or am I being fooled?
Mm-hmm.
Because the reality versus AI expectation, I'm just like, my reality is shifting more towards the
Mm-hmm.
fantasy world, right? So the other day they did release a news article. They said they have found a better perfected medication using AI machine learning. As in, whatever we have
Exactly.
been doing, we are able to do more with it. So now, if you think about drug discovery, that if you bring in a new drug to the market or a new medication to the market, its adaptation is, first is skeptical. Now it gets more skeptical because of AI machine learning, right? So when I'm looking at the news, I'm thinking to myself, like, well, isn't that so bad, because this is already proven drug, proven medication that is being improved on. And when you have already a trusted mechanism that people have already went through and said trials have shown that it is effective, now you have improved it. Or let's say you even optimized it more to say, like, Anuj's body and Asif's body is two different body. Let's not treat it with the same Tylenol. Give it a different Tylenol. Give it a different Advil, right?
Yep.
Amount that Anuj needs and Asif needs is two different things, because they perceive pain differently, right?
Yeah.
So I think these variables that are coming into the question is super important to catch on to right now, because one thing, like you said about data processing, one thing that comes to data processing is time. You
Mm-hmm.
cannot do it overnight, right? You have to give it enough thought, but as you're thinking, you also have to start collecting data. So whatever your ideation is and you're trying to implement it, as you're doing all that, you always will realize, okay, if you didn't take any data collection steps as you're doing an ideation, you're already falling behind, because somebody else is collecting that data and using that for their purposes of AI machine learning capabilities. So you have to do so many steps all at once, but it's exciting because now you know the possibility. Now you trust it. That trusted Tylenol. How can we improve that Tylenol? How can we create that
Mm-hmm.
new drug that we never even seen before? And I'll give you one more example. I think I used that last week, but it's worth mentioning. We're not just talking about treatment. We're not talking about just the patient care. The other day, an MRI was able to read a person's thought using ChatGPT, like large language model. And that's the one I mean by how fake I thought it would be. That you put somebody on MRI and you make them listen to music, and as the brain neuron is happening, looking at the image of that brain neuron, the ChatGPT, like large language model, is able to dissect and understand what that person is thinking. I'm gonna stop
Cool.
right there because that blew me
I
the heck.
would. I need to see that video. Let's. I wish. I wish you could. You know, like I listen to like Joe Rogan. He pulls it up. He's like, "Hey, there's the
Right,
YouTube video.
right.
There it is."
What's his assistant's name? I need a Jarvis next to me to pull that up.
Yeah.
Jarvis,
Yeah.
pull it up.
Yeah. 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 So like, I would love to see that. I mean, I had thought about, you know, AI using it to maybe read imagery, but I had never even imagined that it would be able to read thoughts, you know, like say you only have one radiologist on shift on a, you know, on a night shift, and you have six traumas come into the ER. Somebody's got to read all those, plus everybody else that's sitting there for their regular stuff, you know. So that's the first thing that comes to my mind is like, oh, you know, read the imaging studies and provide with 99% accuracy a diagnosis.
um, Look, I think we are heavily a fan of AI machine learning because the use cases we're seeing, and I think one of the tasks I put myself through is to say, like, where would AI not work, right? Where would we not use AI machine learning? And it was difficult to find, because if you look at everywhere in the world, it's just all data. And everywhere you have data and you can find a good justification of why that data should turn into like AI machine learning research. Excuse me.
I can tell you where I think we shouldn't use it is in
I want to
ethics
get to that. Yeah,
discussion.
exactly. That's where should we not get to it? Because I see one of the question here is asking about facilities cost saving, right?
Mhm.
Oh my goodness! Like because ethics, because of the privacy reasons. Okay, let's say we don't deal with patient EHR at all. Push that aside. Push aside all the things that you can find sensitive. Now, if you start thinking about facilities cost saving, let's say you own multiple hospitals and they are $1 billion organization and you're buying millions of dollars worth of equipment, right? How do you start buying equipment that you don't have to replace every so few years, that you can save those costs and pass it on to your shareholders, pass it on to your care providers, right? That ability to do facilities cost saving, I think is a whole nother conversation. But if I was to start, one thing I will
Oh
tell you
yeah.
now is that the data processing capability using all the semiconductor chips, all the technologies that will adopt the new semiconductor chips for better data processing, they will be able to data process for you in location rather than to say, well, right now we use Amazon Cloud to go to Ohio and process that data and bring it back in home, right? Well, no, in location, you're able to do data processing because your semiconductor chips will have enough cache memory, enough data to process that data and give you the articulated cure or articulated opinion in order to have your facilities save money by not replacing the equipment very frequently. And what do I mean by that? As in, now if you go to a hospital like which I did this morning, I saw so many equipments everywhere, right? And they're being pushed around by the doctors and nurses, and all the equipments are not really talking to each other because there's lack of communication or lack of optimization, right? So facilities cost saving, Arjun, thank you so much for your question because that was so important. We need to um, we need to discuss this, right? The facilities cost saving is something that we can do. But before we do, let's get back to Anuj about his ethics concern, because that is something so important that we have to discuss in every conversation to level set everybody's expectation
Yeah.
about AI machine learning.
Absolutely. Like where you're saying, where wouldn't you use AI? I'm like, that's the first thing. Ethical considerations, you know, what is right and wrong? That AI needs to be left out of that discussion. you know, unless it's learning. I don't understand it well enough to talk about that, but that's the first thing that came to my mind is like, why would it be involved in ethics discussions? Who programs it and teaches it what ethics are? What is right and what is wrong. Um, that gets really, really murky really fast.
If we are talking about ethics, we have HIPAA regulations already in place. And
Mhm.
one of the mentions that I made over and over is that because there's no AI regulations out in the United States yet, does not mean there's no
It's
data regulations out, right? And
no.
if you think about data regulation, is your AI regulations at this point. So how you collect that data, how you utilize that data will ultimately dictate what your AI regulations look like, right? So AI
Mhm.
regulations will come down the pipe because at this point, the White House has principles out for the agencies, and agencies' ability to adapt to this AI machine learning will over time dictate what it is that we do as a country for AI machine learning regulations. And most likely, before we do data regulations and convert that into AI regulation, we will look into uh, GDPR from Europe, right? Take that GDPR thought process of how GDPR impacts AI machine learning and what are the EU AI machine learning policies are, is how we will most likely follow that, right? Give or
Mhm.
take, we'll adjust it for 50 states, right? Um, so if you have the regulations that is not here yet and you're developing AI today, and all of a sudden you get caught up in that GDPR or GRC or the purposes of HIPAA, you have to keep
Yeah,
that in
child
mind.
compliance.
That
Yeah.
compliance, yep. And if you're talking about ethics, I think Arjun said, I've always view ethics as the biggest barrier to fully utilizing AI. I think it's true, but at the same time, you got to remember software is the same way, right? You are able to
Mhm.
do different things with software once you do release it. What you can do with AI is tune it in. And how are you able to tune that AI to a say a way of like not losing your business, but you're still able to use that AI. You're able to do the right AI. So you have to be able to say when you're designing that AI, before you deploy it, as you're designing, you have to keep this consideration in mind. How do I bring this AI home and release it differently, right? What do we do to control that AI's capabilities, right? How do we do monitor and triggering? Is a very good ethics conversation to have in design phase. But yeah, life and death decision. I'll let Anuj handle life and death decisions here.
Yeah, yeah, life and death decisions, all those just different um, ethical decisions that you have to make in healthcare is basically what I'm saying. Like, there's got to be a barrier or something, unless somebody smarter than me figures it out, which I'm sure they will. You know, there's got to be some sort of barrier.
Um, so the trolley problem, right? The trolley situation where the trolley either had to save the passenger or the five people that are laying in the trolley line
Right.
is always the question when it comes to life and death decisions. Like Arjun mentioned, autonomous vehicle, right?
Yeah.
Ambulances.
And I've seen that problem before, and
It's-
nobody ever says stop the trolley.
stop the trolley.
Like, come on, stop the trolley, get the people off the tracks, and then let it go whichever route it wants to go. It's the most simple solution.
Um, so let me ask you about ambulances, right? So you're an EMT, you know about ambulances. What do you think
Yeah,
about
I've
ambulances if they were to be automated, so that way there's not like two-man team, one is worried about driving, but both men are able to look at the person and focus on the person rather than the whole
mhm.
vehicle they have to take care of.
I would say I'm gonna let Elon figure out that self-driving thing, and then we'll talk.
Because I can tell you, they are training NASCARs and
Yeah,
F1 cars to with an AI machine learning, so the AI is
yeah,
able to actually make decisions that fast. So when it comes to an ambulance
and
driving through a red light,
yeah,
it's able to do much better job. Let's say, for example, by detecting cars on four corners rather than a human drivers can, and to take that task off of a human driver, I would say when you look at it from an augmentative or assisting process of an AI, rather than say like let the AI replace everybody or replace the human, that's
hmm
not the path we want to go down. We want to go down the fact that how does an AI augment a human through like a either through a full digital twin process, which is very good for the nurses, but when it comes to an EMT, like say assisting an EMT to do his job better. So that way, instead of doing the job that is 360, the person, the EMT can focus only on the patient, right? On that person that's in front of them. So I think when it comes to automating a vehicle, life or death decisions, um, we have been improving a lot in healthcare, right? Even though there's lots
hmm
of things to work on. The next 10, 15 years, it's not interesting. It'll be mind blowing, in my opinion, because like I
it
said,
will be.
processing capability
It's
and
gonna get weird really quick.
it's going to get real weird real quick because every IoT device also has a health IoT built into it now. So your IoT device can be
hmm
monitoring your bodies, and those are going to provide lots of data, and you have data acquisition points from that individual that's wearing an IoT device in their body. Um,
Yeah.
they're all connected to the internet. So when you're processing the data and you're able to optimize it, it's all going to become very mind blowing very quick.
Oh yeah. I was writing about IoT in college, and it wasn't even a thing yet. And now it's like everywhere around me. You know, everywhere. My
More
washing machine, if it has a problem, will send a Wi-Fi signal, schedule me a tech, and order its own parts.
excuse me, fancy pants.
Yeah. You know, I don't have it set up, but it'll do it.
Hey, I'm always fascinated by what happens at home, right? Because the type of
hmm
device that we have at home. Now you start thinking about smart cities. That's very
Yeah.
important for an ambulance. So when people think of like smart cities, they think like, okay, we're building the city for this purposes. What if you built a city where you're able to travel without cars around, anywhere parked, right? Your cars are not parked anywhere in the street. Your cities look completely different because you don't have parking garage every other block. You're able to utilize more space inside of Manhattan and the Wall Street district to say like, if you drive there, you can drive 55 miles an hour, no problem, because there's no human in the street, right? We're able to do
hmm
so many different layers of innovations with AI machine learning. But think about an ambulance running through a street, right? Ambulance
Yep.
that says all the lights are turned red, right? So that way everybody stopped, and I'm just going through it. You have those kind of built-in data processing capability, and you're able to optimize it for better. Let's say, for example, Anuj said, cost saving, right?
Cost
Um,
saving. Yeah.
they're coming rapidly
Yep.
and fast. And I'll give you one example. The other day, they talked about the fact that this AI has been around for a very long time. Where if you drop something out of your car, it's able to detect if it's a trash or not.
Hmm.
And now you're able to say, "Hey, AI cameras in the highways will tell the cops."
Oh yeah, it's scary. It's scary. It is. But like that self-driving thing in the ambulance, I don't know all about that because I'm not comfortable with the self-driving vehicles yet. But
Okay.
what if you had an arm mounted to the side of the freaking thing that's, like an extra set of hands, right? And a robotic arm powered by AI. Hey AI, take over chest compressions. Boom, chest compressions. Hey AI, hand me the bag valve mask.
Right.
Boom, handed you the bag valve mask. Hand me a 18 gauge needle so I can start an IV.
Anything to assist, right? Anything to assist
Right.
the human to do better, augment the
That type
human.
of augmentation.
Right, right, right. Not replace the human. I think we need to do more
No.
human in the loop rather than to say less human in the loop. And I would say if
Or,
you have a two-man
you
team
know,
instead of an ambulance, what if an AI was driving the car, as an AI robot was driving the car
see,
for you?
yeah,
That
that's
would
where I
be
was. That's where I'm like, man, I don't know if I'd be comfortable with that. But having those robotic arms and maybe a speaker and a camera that's watching you and be like, hey, in a trauma situation, right? We have a whole list of things that medics have to go through. We call it in the Army, we call it the HABCs: hemorrhaging, airway, breathing, circulation. There's a bunch of steps, and that camera is watching you as the EMT go through these steps down your patient, and you miss something. Oh,
Mm,
boom, AI. Hey, don't forget to check if the airway is open before you're checking for the breathing rate and quality.
right. I love that because that's literally the optimization you need using devices that you already have. So if you have devices like, say, for example, connected to your phone, connected to the computer that's in your ambulance, and there's a camera already inside of built in, how do you take those data only from those hardware and data process
Mhm.
them somewhere else and able to shoot that out to the computer, shoot that out to the camera, shoot that out to your wrist watch, whatever the case is, you're able to do so much more because the data processing capabilities are changing very fast and rapidly. And I think we are in 48-minute mark. Let's wrap
Yeah,
this
this went
up. But
fast.
before we go, I talk so fast for this webinar that I get caught up in how fast we went through 48 minutes. We talked
I know
about so many topics.
we talked for an hour yesterday too, right?
Well, I
Oh
love talking
man.
to you about any and everything because you're one of those guys that have wide stretches of experience. Because not only a combat medic, but organizational structure. You are a veteran friend, like you're the mentor and a good friend to have as a veteran, and you're a software engineer. Like, wow, that equation is something that everybody needs, like a friends with a truck, right? A friend that knows how to code these days is very important.
Yeah.
So I love talking to you about any topics, and this has been an amazing discussion because we're gonna have more of these as we
Oh
go.
yeah, absolutely. This is just, the beginning. This is you want speculation, I can speculate all day. We can talk for like 6 hours and just dream up ideas.
So let's take some time and discuss this. Right? It says a LinkedIn user. I'm not sure who it is. Sorry, was Arjun's answer resolved? I just had a similar question. Okay. I think the big question is what areas are humans lacking in? Let's not pull Elon Musk here. I like the idea of Anuj with smart washing machine replace healthcare equipment and parts. Yeah, I think that's part of the cost saving measures, right? The equipments that you have today, and even though they're modern, they're not modern enough for the next 5 years. I think what you've seen
Mhm.
with ChatGPT to answer Arjun's question is that on the software level, you're able to see how fast the adaptation is because of the capability that ChatGPT has set up. Now, if you take that to the hardware side of things, instead of software, your hardwares will shrink in size, and this hardware, a single hardware, will do more, right? As in, it will be able to do more data processing, and it will be able to provide you with better capabilities, as in built-in, like 4-in-1 kind of capabilities, like a dishwasher. What was that? A wash. We talked about a washer, right? But if you think about a
Yeah.
hardware level, the softwares are fast moving. Right now, how does the hardware catch on to that? I think that'll be the cost saving question that Arjun had, which is that your hardwares will shrink in size, and you'll be able to do more with one, right? And if you do more
Mhm.
with one, that means you're more mobile, right? You're able to move around more. If it's not an ambulance, you can have that inside of the hospital. And then if these devices are widely available in your home, think about that for a second. This 4-in-1 devices
Mhm.
that is able to check your oxygen level, check all these little information that a doctor needs. Now you have telemedicine, right? Does a doctor have to have
Just
a patient come into the nurse's room? No, not necessarily. You can do it from home, because the AI machine learning is able to detect all this information for you. So the nurse can just dial in on FaceTime and have a conversation with you about the diagnosis.
so like a small use case for cost saving in facilities, right? Let's just talk about medical supply, right? A hospital is a enormous facility with a lot of medical supply equipment items. A lot of that is expendable, right? You have, prepackaged gauze and tongue depressors and this, that, and the other, and all of those have an expiration date. What if AI is constantly monitoring the usage, the expiration date, and is moving supplies throughout your hospital to where they're going to get used before they get expired and not thrown away?
Um,
You know?
I love that, because that takes away that ethics questions, those privacy questions. Now you're thinking of like, okay, how do we not get into the sensitive part right now? So as we start adopting with
Yeah,
what's possible. The art of possibility
exactly.
starts with the simplest, least sensitive, keep it simple, stupid kind of ways, right?
Yes.
So when you talk about inventory, yeah, who's gonna have issues with you having a good inventory tracking system that is AI
Yeah.
machine learning based? Now you're able to train the data for your hospital operation, so that way you don't have that ethical dilemma that Arjun is mentioning, right?
Yeah.
I think that's important, but if we have to start, we have to start looking at it, right? We have to start figuring out, like, what is the cost, what's the return on investment? If we don't do it, who will do it, and how do we buy that, right? So the thought process needs to be there. And one of the ways I would like anybody who's listening to give me some feedback, including you, Arjun. Tell me what makes AI machine learning easier to understand, right? And I think this conversation sort of does. It gets the conversation started, but we need to make it more simpler, right? We need to make it easier for everybody to understand and everybody to engage. Hopefully, not in an hour-long conversation where I have to talk like 100 miles per hour to, get all the conversation going. But how do we make it easier to understand? What do I need to know? What can Anuj learn from this conversation, so that way he can articulate to his kids, if he has to, about AI machine learning? Because nobody taught us about software development when I was growing up. We need to teach
Nope.
our kids about AI machine learning and how it will impact their life in next 10, 15, 20, 30, however long AI machine learning will be a hot buzzword, right? Because as Anuj talked about it yesterday, we might have quantum computing next, and we're not even going to
Oh
get into
yeah.
it today.
We will have it. We will have it. It's coming.
Right, it's
You
coming,
know,
and
like
that will make
nature already has quantum computers. A leaf is a quantum computer, right?
yeah, we have a quantum internet line that runs in Chicago from a couple blocks down the road. That is a big progress towards quantum computing. And
Hmm.
is ChatGPT vertical or general AI? So when you say general AI, the first thing I think about is AGI. Is that, if that's not it? I think ChatGPT is just a drop in a bucket. On a dry bucket, ChatGPT is a refresher. We still don't know how much we're going to get out of AI and how big that bucket is, how to fill it. So ChatGPT is just a drop in a bucket. We are very excited about it because it brings all the use cases and optimizes it for a very good user experience. This is just a start. So this API that you see, the investment that Microsoft had made in ChatGPT, is just a start, because you could think about it. Bloomberg came out with their own large language model, and what happens next? Who's that healthcare industry that's going to bring their own health large language model based on healthcare sensitivity? so people don't have to worry about HIPAA violation or PII regulations, right?
Mhm.
I think hopefully that answers your question, because if you're thinking about like a general AI, AGI is, I'm going to say it like this: I don't believe in AGI, because I believe in augmenting humans using AI is what we will develop, and that's the only one we need. And mother of all innovation is need. So if we don't need it, we're not going to develop it. But if somebody does, good for them, right? But I will always say, let's go for augmenting and assistive AI, rather than general AI. That, like, no, that's kind of scary.
Yeah.
And one of the scenarios where we can use this tool is writing policies. Oh my goodness. Like, yeah, Anuj, you talked about inventory. What about writing policies? What about writing documents? What
Oh
about
yeah.
taking notes that has nothing to do with the patient? What about just, understanding let's say, for an example, AI that is able to capture all 50 states, different levels of regulations for each state, and is able
Mhm.
to delta get the new information about healthcare regulations that is changing, and it's able to create new documents and let the notes that
Keep your
synopsis
policies up to date. Yeah.
policies up to date. Send that note to the medical chief. Say, hey, medical chief, yesterday this was allowed, today it's not allowed, because
That's
somehow the
wonderful.
commissioners
Yeah.
love
Automatic,
that. Yeah.
automatic legislative or whatever, regulatory compliance.
Think about it from
That's
tax
awesome.
purposes, right?
You
You're
know, I
taxing
think
your state
about,
agencies all the time.
mhm.
So does federal level, right? So you're able to always understand the delta in what has changed and what needs to be implemented. You know?
Yeah, I think about stuff like when I was a young leader at Madigan Army Medical Center, and we were, in the pediatric clinic, and we were trying to figure out what we medics were allowed to do, and I had to call around to all the different Army hospitals and talk to them and be like, "What do you guys do? What do you guys do?" That AI would have been amazing in developing that policy. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. And I see another question about, can you explain better in details, three, knowing, being, and doing. I would love to talk more about knowing, being, and doing, because that is how you level set everybody's understanding of what needs to happen within an organization, either be it commercial, federal, or state level. Because if everybody could understand that knowing, being, and doing, everybody will understand who knows what and who needs to do what, right? Because if you understand that differences between what do you know and what somebody else knows, and how do you combine that
Hmm.
together and you optimize it, that's your human intelligence. But if you put that in AI can do it better, right?
Yeah.
So AI has an attention, that humans don't. AI is able to focus on one single topic and just starts doing that and becomes that, right? So ChatGPT is really good at answering your questions, but think about it. Do you want ChatGPT to make your decisions today? You don't. Ultimately, you would have a system that is cognitive intelligence, right? It's able to make decisions, right? So AI makes lots of answers for you, gives you a lot of answers. BI gives you lots of intelligence about your business options. Where we are developing today, by optimizing it, we will have CI, which is cognitive intelligence, to help you make decisions, if not make those decisions for you. I'm preferring the first one rather than the second one. However, we're not
Yeah.
going to get into the artificial general intelligence conversation. But we've, man, this is great topic, my friend. I'm so glad we did the part two. We're going to do
Awesome.
part three, right? We're going to do part three, but first we're going to cycle through all the other industries first and make time for healthcare one more time in part three. And Anuj, what do you say before we take off from the hour-long webinar?
Well, first, I just want to say, hey, thanks for having me. This was really great. I'm glad I said yes. I had second thoughts. I was like, man, this is scary. I got to be on a live with all these people listening, but uh, I really appreciate it. And I'm excited to see where this goes. I'm happy for you, and you're doing some great things. I really appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate you, because you are taking literally time in the middle of the week to be here with me and talk about this topic that I'm very passionate about, and you're very passionate about it. And as we discuss, we get to understand a lot of the differences, right? So here's something to be, something to look out for, right? We're gonna take this webinar and we're gonna release it 4 different time slot next week. So if you missed it this time, we're going to release it again so you can watch it live. Live as in we're not going to be there live, but I'll be able to answer any of your questions. You'll be able to, send me your comments through your comments in LinkedIn or YouTube or Facebook. Until next time, thank you all very much for your time, and see you next time in our webinar. Bye-bye.
All right, man. See you next time.
See you next time.